additional whammy is the one big beautiful bill, and how that affects higher ed funding.
Good
So we are
point.
we are not trying to like scare anyone or anything, but just guys, this is going to be a weird year.
Hello, Seven Sage LSAT podcast listeners. Welcome back. I'm excited. We have a very special edition of the podcast today. You've heard the Seven Sage LSAT podcast. Hopefully, you've heard the Seven Sage Admissions podcast. But have you heard the LSAT Seven Sage X Collab Admissions podcast? I don't know.
It's been about a year since we've done one of the collabs.
Yeah, we did this before. Have you ever done it with somebody that's not me? I think you and I are the only ones that have done this before.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I know. But happy to be back. Not to cut over my introduction. Bailey, keep going.
No, I was going to say, and welcome. This is Jake. Please tell me about yourself, Jake.
Hey, everyone.
Why should we believe you? I believe
you.
You.
Exactly. So, hey, I'm Jake Baska. I'm one of the admissions consultants at Seven Sage. So there's the LSAT prep wing of Seven Sage where Bailey hangs out. There's the admissions consulting wing where I reside. And among other things, do our admissions podcast, weekly blog, all that stuff. Prior to joining the Seven Sage team, though, so where does my authority, where do the bona fides come from? I worked in higher ed admissions for about 15 years, including a stint as director of admissions and financial aid at Notre Dame Law School, and I was a part of various LSAC subcommittees in that time, and all that good stuff. So that's built up the experience to then transition into admissions consulting and all that good stuff.
Amazing. So he knows what he's talking about for sure.
Most of the time, etc. Well, and especially on the things we're about to talk about.
Perfect. Amazing. Yeah. And we get a lot of admissions related questions in classes. And I always have to caveat that, hey, I'm no admissions professional. I've heard plenty of good advice because we have an awesome admissions team. And of course, like just in the realm of LSAT and law school appliers, I've heard plenty of advice. But it's so hard to figure out what's right and what's wrong and what really is good advice. And so I always try to run my advice by our awesome admissions team. And I'm technically not even supposed to give that much specific admissions advice. That's why we have these people, and they're awesome, and they do have the experience to be able to know what they're talking about. So I'm excited. We're just going to be talking about a lot of the stuff that people seem to be coming into classes, just talking about online, big questions related to this admission cycle and kind of where we're at. And we're going to get some expert advice on it.
Totally. Fire away, Bailey.
All right. So first of all, I have lots of people that are either, okay, hopefully it's not that you're just starting to study now, but you are maybe getting near the end of your studying and you're looking at these upcoming tests and maybe, well, I think we're probably going to release this after the September test, but we're taking it right now, like the week of the September test. Maybe you're realizing that the September test you're not quite so ready for. Maybe you also have October on the horizon, but oh no, that's just one more month of preparation. Will I be ready for that? People get real scared to start taking the October and November tests for some reason.
We always see a lot of cold feet right before an LSAT too. So it's a very normal, and by cold feet, like I just mean anxieties, and it's very normal to see a lot of last minute reschedules, cancellations, and things of that nature. So this is a normal thing for people to go through. But at this time of year, what's the problem, Bailey, with moving your September LSAT to November versus moving a February LSAT to June? What's the problem?
Yeah, well, I think people get scared of, oh no, am I too late in the cycle now? Do I have to push back to another cycle?
Exactly, because applications have now opened, right? So, usually the question I get is some variation of, is it too late to apply if I get my LSAT back in October? And, the one thing I want to make sure to say right from the beginning, like crystal clear to everyone, the best time to apply is when you can submit your strongest application. That is the golden rule, okay? And now, if you're listening to this at some point in the future, you're listening to this advice in February, and you're getting ready to apply in the upcoming admission cycle, I'd also encourage you, like, hey, if at all possible, it's also good to apply a little bit earlier in the admissions year. But for people listening right now who are taking the September, October, and November exams, our international listeners who may not be able to take the LSAT until January because of that test schedule, hey, apply when you can put together your strongest application. But now, so that's the number one rule. Once we go past that, though, you start to move into the gray zones, where I think it's just useful to recognize a couple factors that exist outside of you. Okay, and those factors are things like, it is rolling admission. and much more so than undergrad. In the world of undergrad admissions, most elite colleges and universities post admissions decisions twice a year. There's like early action, early decision in December. There's regular action, regular decision in like March. There's a little bit of waitlist activity that doesn't really count. There's like December, March. That's it. On the law
Right.
school side of things, really the only school that does that is Harvard, where Harvard, even right now, they have already posted exactly. Here
Yeah.
is the date in January that we will release admits, and here's the date in February. Here's the date in March where we will release admits. Everyone else, though, everyone has their own different patterns, but once they start issuing admissions decisions, they're going to continue doing so on a regular basis throughout the admission cycle. So, for example, historically, Washington University in St. Louis is one of the first of the elite schools to issue decisions. Usually as early as middle of September, if not end of
Oh, wow.
middle of September, end of September, and then they'll keep issuing admit decisions pretty regularly for the next couple of months. Okay, other schools may wait until the Christmas, New Year's holiday season to issue their first wave, etc. So there's rolling admission. Also, it is a we're in a period where applications are up significantly nationally. There are simply more people competing for the same number of seats at law schools. Law schools are not increasing enrollment, so it's the same number, but more people competing for it. So you need to apply when your application is at its strongest. If that's not until November, that's okay. Just recognize over here off to the side, there are more people. And by more, last year applications were up nationally by 22%. And that was a 15-year high in applications. So we're talking real numbers, not just like, oh, they were up 4%. No, like this
Right.
this was a wave of applications. So if you can't apply until November because of that LSAT, that's okay. Just understand this is happening off to the side. And then the next point is you still have time to work on your application materials while studying for the LSAT. So that way, when you get your LSAT back in November, ideally you can apply as quickly as possible afterwards. So there are things you can still do to mitigate that situation. The doomsday scenario is I'm only going to study for the LSAT. I won't do any application materials till I get my score back on it's
Right.
and this year it's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So, and
Oh,
then I'm gonna take
goodness.
Thanksgiving weekend off. And,
Right. And then
and
it just
then
actually ends up getting pushed in December. And then that's a
exactly. Oh,
lot. That is
Christmas. I
later.
mean, yeah, and then you just see that avalanche happening of reasons to move this back further and further. So it is a heavy lift to work on application materials and LSAT prep at the same time. Totally. But if you want to mitigate, like, hey, if I want to be as competitive as possible and get in at least as early as I can get in, and that may not be until late November, early December, there are things I can do now to help with that process.
Exactly. No, that makes sense. Yeah. And I always tell people at the very least, you could be putting together your applications between taking the test and score release. Like you got all that nervous energy. You could, put it towards something. But ideally, I think you kind of start drafting
Mhm.
before that. You definitely start
Yep.
asking for letters of recommendation so that, the
Yep.
people have more than a few weeks to put it together, your letters of recommendation. Like be respectful to the professors and the
Hmm.
employers that you're asking about that. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Okay,
Hmm.
so that's helpful. And we were talking too about like how big of a dent or not a dent, but how big of a like step up does that early application give you? And it really is just from what I've heard, it's giving you a step
Yeah.
up if you're already above one of the medians, like it's helpful to get your score in, but if you're not quite above the median, I mean your application might be sitting around anyways, being ready to like being waited on to be
Yep.
even looked at until they've already gone through all the people who are around their medians. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, yes and no, because I would also
Okay.
okay. Admissions officers know at the end of the day, they each build application models and admit models, meaning, hey, um, we are trying to get so I was director of admissions at Notre Dame Law School. Notre Dame has published their medians at like a 170 and like a 388 389 GPA this year. Okay, that was the stats for this year's incoming class. So maybe they are now establishing an admit model to target a 170 and a 39 next year. Who knows? And in order to get to that goal, who do we need to admit? Because historically, we know if someone has a 174 and a 4.0, even if we admit, they're probably not going to come. They have a lower enrollment percentage because they're also being admitted by T14s. Okay.
Right.
If we admit people in this range, we usually give $15,000 in scholarships. So do we try to admit more, but then how does that affect our scholarship budget? Point being,
Uh,
they're already entering this process with a lot of data on their side. So then vis-a-vis those early applications, there's this weird tension between we know at the end of the day, we probably need to admit th- a cohort that looks statistically like this, and here's data that helps us get there. Okay, but we'll see how the application pool fluctuates. Um, but there's
that
also
makes
the human
sense.
instinct of once you start reading applications, you like people and you know that we need to admit people. So why not admit this person who I like today rather than hope I get someone who I like more 2 months from now? Okay, so now going back to your examples. If that person has at least one stat above one of my medians, oh, we're good to go here. Or if they're above both medians, we're good to go here. I would also throw out there, we know built into our model, we can admit and enroll a certain number of people who are low on both of our stats. Okay. And my thought on that front was always if let's play the mind game of would if we admit this person today in December, would we feel bad in February if we have people who are better than this. And usually pretty quickly when you think of it that way, you go, no, if we feel bad about this person, that just means we had an amazing crop of applications, but we're not going to feel bad about this person. But then other times you do go, actually, when you put it like that, historically, yeah, we do see a lot of people like this, probably more appropriate to waitlist here. So point of that being, if you are lower with the medians and you're not retaking the LSAT, so this is as good statistically as you're going to get. I think that that is a group where it is nice to get your application in a little bit earlier because there are more of those seats in that lower statistical
Got
area
it.
right now, as opposed to I may have gone crazy in December admitting people, and then I know as a professional we can't admit anyone else there. Okay,
Right.
so the seats at the end may get full, or the rooms at
No,
the
that
end may
makes a
get
lot of
full.
sense. That makes sense. Yeah, it's so helpful getting your perspective because, like, on the other side, you're thinking about your own application. You're
Yep.
really not thinking about everybody else's application and just, wow, there's a lot of moving pieces. So that makes a lot of sense.
But also, you have to only think of your application. So
Right.
another faux pas, and this is like a whole other thing, but another faux pas are people who ask, how can I differentiate myself from all the other applicants? To which the answer is, don't worry about that because you don't know who they are. You've created an image in your
Right.
mind of who they. Don't worry about them. But that's like a whole other topic.
No,
Like,
that
how do I
makes a lot of
differentiate myself? In
sense.
my personal statement, everyone wants to write about being a corporate attorney or a human rights attorney. Like, dude, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You just write about why you want to be an attorney. Okay.
Right. Like, just do the thing that's actually honest to yourself because that's going to be the thing that differentiates yourself. Like,
And it'll
you
make
are you.
sense. It'll make sense.
Yeah.
Don't think about standing out. Think about making sense.
Cool. No, that
Mhm.
that that makes a lot of sense. Good.
Oh, thanks,
Yay.
Bailey.
Amazing. Okay, cool. So we're covering like, is it worth applying early or not? Is November too late? That's super
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, and
I'm trying to
realistically, I'll
think.
put a stat on there for you. Like by November 1st, usually about the first quarter of the national applicant pool has actually submitted their applications. If you look at past data from LSAC. So it's only the
That's
first
good to
quarter.
know.
The caveat though is in a world it's the pie has expanded, right? So it's no longer like a 6-inch self-serve pizza. It is a 14-inch
Oh, it's
pizza.
big.
That's where the
Yeah,
app
true. Like that
exactly
12%, or sorry, that 12%, where did I get that? The 25% is
has
a
increased.
larger
Yeah.
amount at this
But
point.
still,
Yeah.
even if you apply by December 1st, that's usually about the first like 35 to 40% of the
Oh,
applications.
wow.
You're
Okay,
still
that's
at the
good to
front end
know
of
because in
things.
my head, that's like 50%. So that's really
No,
helpful.
and
Really helpful.
also this is more important for the most elite schools because they are going to be the
Mm,
most competitive. For schools that have to be less selective in admissions, and that's not a pejorative. It's just like some schools need to admit more of their applicants in order to hit their enrollment numbers. Once you get past the top 30 in the US News rankings, it's not as mission critical to get your applications in as early as possible. So for example, if you're that Chicago area kid who's looking at U Chicago Northwestern, Loyola, DePaul, Kent are the five schools in the city of Chicago. Yeah, Northwestern Chicago, you want to get your apps in a little bit earlier. Loyola, DePaul can, if you get your applications in December, January, you should still expect that you have a good chance of being considered for admission, that they aren't going to have filled up all their seats by that juncture.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, cool. And then on this same vein, it's like, say that you have taken the LSAT already. You're trying to
Mhm.
decide, should I take the LSAT again? Is it going
Yeah.
to be super helpful to take November? Like, how valuable would that be if there's a good
Yeah.
shot at getting over that median at your dream school? Like, is that worth it
Right.
at this point?
Okay. So from an admission standpoint, because then I'm going to flip it back to you, okay, from like the LSAT standpoint. But from an
Yeah,
admission
I'm
standpoint,
curious.
usually the way I put this to my clients is, um, first of all, what do you think is achievable? So, for example, it's that Chicago student, okay, and they're trying desperately. The dream is Northwestern or U Chicago. Their medians are 171 and 173. I think for Northwestern U Chicago, respectively. Are you sitting on a 169? And as you are consistently practicing for the LSAT, were you practicing in the low 160s? So the 169 was like a miracle that came out of nowhere, okay?
Right.
Or were you consistently practicing in the low 170s? Okay? So is this goal achievable? Step 1. But then step 2, will it make a huge difference? So for example, let's change the parameters here. Um, Northwestern U Chicago Dreams, you're currently sitting on a 160, but you think you can move that into the mid to low 160s, like a 164. Moving from a 160 to a 164, that's great. Is that really going to change your admissions decision from Northwestern? Probably not. But if you move from a 169 to a 171, from below median to to median, that will change the admissions possibilities. It will also have a big effect on financial aid possibilities, merit aid possibilities. So as long as we're talking, especially November, that shouldn't be too problematic. Once you start looking more January for a retake, February for a retake, yeah, that can be a bit challenging. So I'd say from the admission standpoint, do you think you can do better? Do you have real reason to think you can do better? And will it make a difference? Especially, like I said, going from below to at or above a school's median, that's the real part. Oh, related. I sometimes get questions from people who are already above a school's median and they ask, should I retake to bump it up even further? And we laugh only because it's a first world problem.
Right. Yeah, I'm just like, okay, so you're already at like the 172. Should you retake to? I mean, it just depends, probably. I'm
Well,
guessing. Let's
I
see.
think because the assumption is, well, surely that will make me even more competitive. Not technically, because in a world of medians, you are either at or above the median or you're below. You're either in the +1 column or the -1 column. And it doesn't help the school more for you to be even higher in the +1 column. You're all +1. So for Northwestern, whether you're at a 171 or 177, you help them achieve their 171 median in the exact same way. So
Interesting.
the only reason I would suggest someone do that is if you take a look at their scholarship information, say on websites like Law School Data, and if you see, oh, there's a big difference in how they award scholarship to someone with my GPA in a 172 versus my GPA in a 174. Okay, cool. Like, I get that, and, admissions officers also get people wanna maximize scholarship. They get that. But if you're thinking of it more from the standpoint of just like, "Gosh, I know I can do better. I want to prove this to myself," I would just say, like, nope, tell you what, like, make a clip art, like, law school champion badge, make that,
Right.
print it out, laminate it,
Just send it to
slap it on your
yourself. You'll
wall.
feel just as good. Exactly.
Exactly. That will you have won the LSAT. Congrats, you're done. But now
No, that's
to flip
good.
it back to you though, Bailey. So like you are in that position as the LSAT tutor, instructor, the person on the ground working with someone, especially from that standpoint of what do you think is achievable? What's usually that side of that conversation you have with someone? I just got my 163 back. I'm dreaming about a 171. I got 2 months. How do you walk people through that conversation?
Right. Good question. So, yeah, first of all, what you said earlier about like, what was that score? Like, if we're talking a 169 and you had consistently been scoring like maybe low to mid 150 or 150s, whoa, that would be crazy.
In
Then,
that case, you are done.
then
do,
please don't take it
do
again.
not
Yeah.
do not retake the LSAT.
Somehow you got
Walk
that
away.
169. Don't mess with it. Yeah.
Yep.
It's like,
Don't ask
it's like
questions.
Jenga when it's about to fall. It's like, don't
Yep.
touch it. Just walk
Yep.
away. No, that's such a good point. But no, if it was like, you got like a few points higher on test day than your
Yep. Yep.
actual score, which, by the way, you guys, this is really rare. For the vast majority of students, you're going to score around your average
Yep.
PT, I almost said average PT average. Yep, the average. But also, or sometimes there's a little bit of that like test day penalty, which
Yeah.
might just be kind of nerves, might be logistics, might be literally anything that went different or extra. Like you did something extra on test day that was a little bit different from how you're studying. We can talk about all that, but all that to say, a lot of times people are at their average or below their average. And so
Yep.
if that's you, where you scored above your average on test day and it really kind of felt like, wait, I never even pulled that off on a PT before, I don't know, then yeah, I wouldn't mess with that. But if you have been scoring in the low 170s and you really want to just be able to pull that off on a real test and you, oh no, got that 169, 168 on their most recent test. Yeah, I mean,
Which,
like
by the
you're
way, is
already
like underscoring, but not drastically so.
right, but
You know
not
what I
that
mean?
much. True. Yeah,
Yep.
people put too much pressure on that. It's like, wait, think about it. The difference between a 169 and a 171, depending on the curve of the test, is usually
Yeah.
2 or 3 questions. Like it really is just how many points it is and the amount of questions
Exactly.
you're missing. And
Mhm.
so, yeah. Anyways, yeah, so that's like normal variation between PTs. However, if you're already being able to pull off those scores in a higher range, then yeah, I think that would be a really good reason why you might want to be taking a future test. But say that you're in that position where we were just talking about where you got this 163, that was around your average and you're trying to get into the 170s and you're like, "Okay, I just got my score back for August. Can I improve that by
In
October? Can I
2
improve
months,
that
in a
by
month. Yep.
November?" Exactly. I'm just like, this is a hard test. It takes a long time to
Is this
improve.
purely
It's
a video
possible.
podcast, or is this also an audio podcast? Because I wanna make sure if there's an audio aspect, the face Bailey made definitely was like, "I
Oh,
don't wanna
yeah, true.
tell
You
you that your
can listen
dreams
just
don't
audio.
exist. I don't wanna tell you your dreams don't exist, but actually, facially, yeah, your dreams are
But
not."
just be careful. Yeah, and
Yep.
I'm so on the I'm in the camp of this is a very learnable, teachable
Yep.
test. It usually just takes more time than you're thinking. And so I'm not to tell you that you can never get in the 170s. Oh my God, you're so close. You can totally get in the 170s. Is it going to happen in that 1 month or 2 months that you're giving yourself? Likely not. I think that especially if we're
Yep.
talking the 160s, the 170s jump, and I think part of it is this mental game of like, oh no, this magical 170 barrier. I feel so stuck in the 160s. Lots of different reasons why that is one of the hardest jumps to make on this test. And so
Yep.
I think the other thing that happens is that if you're putting that much pressure on yourself to have to get it done by a certain date, that actually ends up being counterproductive. Like
Yeah.
you actually, just because we're humans, it's a lot of pressure. Like, yeah, pressure can be motivating, but for a test like this, where you really just have to be patient and retrain
Yeah.
your brain to read and think in a different way, it's going to take time. And so rushing it just is going to make it so you're probably actually doing worse than you would have done had you not rushed it and just gave yourself like I'm going to retake it again in March and let's see if I can just keep practice testing in this range. You might, happen to get to the 170s a lot sooner, giving yourself a longer timeline versus giving yourself that short crunch time. So, all that to
Yeah.
say, you're asking for a lot if you're looking to jump from the low 160s to the 170s in a 1 month or 2 month time span. I've seen it been done before. It's not to say it's not possible, but like rarely
Yeah.
does that happen. And so you
It's a
just
risky
got to be
strategy.
careful.
It's I
Exactly.
think there's a difference between let me take one, and I will also acknowledge the mindset here has to be, I wanna take one more crack at it, let me give it a shot, versus I must do it. 'Cause I think down that second road, that ladder road, you're creating that anxiety loop too, as opposed to,
Right.
no, mentally, I'm starting to move into application mode, but you know what? Yeah, they let me take it 5 times, so you know what? Let's just
Right.
do it. I mean, there's also that, but I do find usually in these conversations, there is a lot of anxiety about there must only be one true answer that is the best path. And the variations are as subjective as we were talking about. Like, and I'll say
Right.
there's a big difference between, do you already have your personal statement all ready to go? You have your application materials all ready to go. So you literally can click submit after that November LSAT, or you have done nothing at all
Right.
on the application front, you know? So, you should really get rolling on that.
Yeah, and don't be under I mean, I don't I you speak from the admissions perspective here, but just knowing how long it takes people to write things, like, don't be
Yeah.
underestimating how much time it's gonna take to get all those essays out, to also
Mhm.
make sure that you're catering everything to each school.
Yeah.
It takes time for sure. So,
And I think
yeah,
that's a bit
start
like
that
LSAT
now.
prep in the standpoint of, like, if there's a will, there's a way, but there's also only so much you can conceivably do in one sitting. Um,
Right.
and so sometimes people really need to feel that heat of deadlines to get inspired to write a draft.
Right.
But writing a draft versus writing a final draft is night and day.
No, that makes sense. Exactly. Okay, so let's kind of wrap it up here with this final question. And I was going to ask something kind of more broad than this, but I'll make it more specific.
Yep.
So first of all, how do we figure out like, do I submit or do I not? Am I submitting when I do my strongest application or when I have my strongest application
Mhm.
this cycle versus at
Okay.
what point do you think about pushing to the next cycle?
Oh,
And my
yeah,
question was like, how often are you telling people to push to the next cycle? Because I'm encouraging people to do it probably more often than they would want, right? But I think it's
yeah.
sometimes the best advice. What do you think though?
I really think the line there is, and this is usually the conversation like November, December, January, especially
Right.
when people get the January score back, and if they have a bump there, um, I start with, ideally, what would you like to be doing in August? Would you like to be in law school? Okay, and if the answer is yes, I want to be in law school in August. Okay, then let's follow that up with, what are acceptable outcomes? Because let's say it's that person who got that 172, and now they say an acceptable outcome is only T14, or maybe I'll like consider, maybe I'll slum it at Vanderbilt or USC or George
And that's so
Washington.
funny because like it's not slumming it, but
Oh, no,
exactly.
exactly, but these,
Right.
I have a lot of these conversations, right, where, again, my
Right.
professional experience was at Notre Dame Law School, which is a really fancy law school. It's not a
Right. I'm
T14, though,
impressed.
and so it's weird
Yeah.
when I have these conversations where they're like, "Oh, Notre Dame's not good enough for me," like, "Ah, okay, sure." But, there are those people who are T14 or bust. Okay, so if the answer is, "I wanna be in law school, but it's T14 or bust," like, okay, then we're really late in that process. The next question would be, how do you feel about shooting your shot, and can you put together a good application in the next 2 weeks or so? Or would you rather just hold off? And do you feel like you have something else constructive you can do for another admissions year, work for another year, etc.? Some people, just when you talk them through things, either their personal and professional life is such that, nope, I'm going to law school next year. Yep, I'll shoot my shot at T14s. If I end up lower down, that's okay. It's time for me to start law school. Other people, it's like, no, once we talk that out, oh, I can just keep working my job. I'll save some more money. I'll be good to go. I'm gonna add a further caveat, though, for this year, Bailey, not to open a can of worms, because this was the last question we were gonna do, but an additional whammy is the one big beautiful bill, and how that affects higher ed funding.
Good
So, we are
point.
we are not trying to, like, scare anyone or anything, but just, guys, this is gonna be a weird year, and the real quick version of things is that, federal graduate student loans are now capped. So, up until now, you could borrow up to the total cost of attendance, which isn't just tuition, but also room and board, books, transportation. You could conceivably have borrowed that entire amount in federal student loans. The one big beautiful bill is capping that for professional students, med and law, at $50,000 per year for, but here's the twist. So that's twist one. Here's twist two. For graduate students who begin their studies on July 1st, 2026 or later. Now you may go, but every law school begins in August and September. But Bailey, oh ho, higher ed people are shifty. What if this year we have our 1Ls do one credit of law school research and writing beginning on June 20th?
Smart.
Right? Now, I'm not saying schools are definitely gonna do that, but there's chatter about this. Like, we're all trying to figure out ways how not to beat the system, but this is a real problem. How can we fill this gap for students? Is that through scholarship? Is that through working with outside, lenders, preferred banks for lending purposes? What are some options that are on the table? And one conceivable option is that. So, that person who's like, "I'll just wait one more year." I'm like, "Okay, now hold on. There's a twist this year. There's a twist." So, check to see if some of the schools that you may be interested, are they are they in this cohort of schools that may be considering that June start? In which case, may I gently encourage you, if you want to use federal education loans to finance your education, you may want to start
That's
this year
smart.
versus next year. But like this is a super specific problem to people in this past admission cycle who were considering reapplying in this upcoming year. So we gave them a heads up, like, hey, did you follow the headlines about the one big beautiful bill? Cool. Here's how that applies to you, my friend. And then in this
Mhm.
admission cycle, it could play out for some folks too. But okay, but the main points are still: are you comfortable shooting your shot? What are the main things you want to do in August? Do you have an opportunity to do something else for this coming year, if not be in law school? How do you feel about those things?
No, that makes so much sense. Thank you for bringing that up, by the way, because that is something that I literally would have never thought about, and that does
Oh,
make a big difference for sure. A
the
big,
amount of
beautiful
conversations I've had with
difference.
people about that, about student visas. It's an
Oh
interesting time to
gosh.
be an
Oh gosh.
international student coming to the States. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of new things this year.
Crazy, crazy. Okay, that was really helpful perspective. And yeah, just to like add a little bit from the LSAT side. I mean, like if we're talking you're trying to get that 160 to 170 by November, I mean, you got to give yourself more time, honestly.
Yep.
And so if that looks like maybe shooting for the January test and if you can get it there, that's when you start to do this kind of like cost benefit analysis that Jake's talking about right now
Yep.
about like what are your preferred outcomes? What are your
Yep.
options? What kind of decisions do we make? Great. But yeah, that is really helpful perspective for sure. So everybody keep that in mind. Sweet. All right. We've covered a lot. Any last thoughts?
The You can only do your best. And I don't mean that in a corny way, guys, but like
No, it's
a,
true.
a lot a lot of the applicants I work with are comparing themselves against false ideals. And they're also comparing themselves versus like for people who applied to law school 7 years ago when there weren't as many applicants.
Hmm.
And that's just, hey, it's okay to be upset about that, but you can only do your best on the LSAT in your applications. And if you want to go to law school and be a lawyer, there are opportunities out there. Okay,
Right.
so just do your best and get excited about going to law school. Okay, this is only meant to be the process to get you to your goal, or the next step, which is to go to law school to then be a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and don't lose sight of why you're doing this because it can get so easy to just get bogged down in all of this pressure and the
Absolutely.
anxiety and the I feel like I should. But just remind yourself, like, hey, why am I doing this? Because I want to be a lawyer. I want to have this law degree. Like, what is the reason why you're doing this?
Hmm.
And I mean, not to pretend like I'm the admissions counselor here, but let that stuff shine through in your applications,
Yeah.
right? Like, we want that clear why law. And
Hmm.
so don't forget that. Yay. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm excited to do more collabs like this in the future. Check out the admissions podcast as well as the Seven Sage podcast. You just Google Seven Sage admissions or LSAT podcast. It'll pop up wherever you get your podcasts.
Hmm.
And what are the normal things I should remember to say? Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Put your comments below if you have any questions. If you
And
want
by the way,
specific advice, yeah, go for it.
right, if through this you're like, wow, I didn't know Seven States had an admissions consulting wing, you can check that out too. And the easiest thing is to do is Google Seven Sage Admissions Consulting, and to see all the services that we have to offer.
Right, exactly. And they're awesome. You can get a free consult, ask your questions, you figure out what the different services are. Lots of different options to get some help.
Exactly.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast
Absolutely.
and I'll hopefully see you soon. Goodbye
Sounds good.
everybody.
Thanks everyone. Bye.